And 3 weeks into the college football season, two head coaches at the Power Four level are already out of a job, one in the Big Ten, one in the ACC. We preview matchups of the CFP contenders, some of which we put under the microscope. We also go into the best individual performances on Walking the Dogs in week 3. And the short list brings us into previews about the matchups to watch this weekend. And of course, my host, Owen Kasanovich, was kind enough to join and update you on his record on Broadway books, as well as give you a little bit more insight on the Owening Line for the singles and parlays you should pick. Wyatt Kopelman here, excited to bring you along into episode 8 of Broadway to Broadway. Owen, what's going on with you? How are you doing as most of the non-conference matchups already wrap up here?
I'm doing well. A couple great ball games last weekend in week 3 with Tennessee and Georgia, and of course Florida LSU, excuse me, in the SEC. But ready to get after it as we enter week 4 here.
Yeah, let's get going into some of the biggest headlines. SEC matchups are getting underway. You have a couple of Big Tens getting going this weekend as well. Illinois has a big game against a ranked Indiana team. You also have a couple of SEC matchups already underway as well. Two coaches in the Big Ten and the SEC out as of Sunday, as mentioned. According to the Associated Press, UCLA second-year coach Deshaun Foster has been let go. The Bruins started the season 0-3 for the first time since 2019. And the AP also reported Sunday Virginia Tech fired coach Brent Pry upon the Hokies' 45-26 home loss to Old Dominion of the Sun Belt Conference. Pry and Virginia Tech are a team that just never seem to find enough momentum to get to consistent bowl games in Blacksburg. And that team 0-3 for the first time since 1987 in Pry's fourth season with the program. So Owen Foster's done after going 5-10 in replacement of Chip Kelly. Pry finished 16-24, just 10-13 in the ACC. Figured the Hokies faithful and the athletic administration expected better of him. The schools didn't hesitate after these winless starts.
Yeah, Virginia Tech looked pretty bad against Old Dominion last Saturday, so I'm not surprised by both of these decisions to let go of Brent Pry and Deshaun Foster. College Game Day kind of touched on it a little bit at the start of the season after Virginia Tech lost to South Carolina going into week 2. When all you have as students or even fans of the team is the Enter Sandman introduction that you have to look forward to when it comes to Virginia Tech. That's not a good sign when it comes to your football team. As a potential replacement for Virginia Tech, I would have to look towards Tim Banks, Tennessee defensive coordinator. He's turned Tennessee into one of the best defenses in the country these last 3 or 4 years, and he has a little bit of a relationship with Brent Pry to some prior coaching experience, and he's kind of worked his way up to becoming a defensive coordinator on that side of the ball after being a defensive assistant. But you just look at what he's done at Tennessee. His defenses have been some of the best in the country when it comes to applying pressure on opposing quarterbacks and creating turnovers. I think he should be able to recruit fine for Virginia Tech, and I think they will be able to disperse him with good NIL money for high level recruits. And then when it comes to UCLA, I got to go Will Stein. I think he would be able to provide a spark to UCLA. I think they need someone that's a good offensive mind, and Stein is certainly that. And just to get UCLA back on track because there was nothing really good under Deshaun Foster, to be honest.
Have you seen the footage of his Big Ten Media Day press conference that's been on Twitter and Instagram over the past couple of days? Because he makes that introductory press conference, Owen, and the first thing that comes to my mind is fresh-faced assistant coach, running backs coach, with or within the program, regardless, he's not prepared. And he may have an understanding for the culture, but it doesn't mean or entitle him that he can go and coach a Power Four team like UCLA that's been starved for success in that Rose Bowl and for a historic college football and professional sporting venue, even Olympics. That location that is become a landmark for decades on end in college football has more relevance with the actual college football playoff semifinal games. Think about Wisconsin and Oregon and how Mario Cristobal led the Ducks to that only New Year's Six Bowl during his tenure in Eugene. There have been so many other momentous games for programs because of the meaning of that bowl. So because Foster didn't even look ready, it just seemed like there was a rudderless ship in the middle of Los Angeles when it comes to that football program over the past couple of years.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I mean that introductory press conference was very interesting. I'll leave it at that. It was like, hey, we're UCLA, we play in LA, we play at the Rose Bowl, we're in the Big Ten. Just yeah, didn't seem like Foster was was ready to take on this kind of role, and I know he was coaching at his alma mater, so that's always interesting. But yeah, to your point, a lot of questionable things there, and the Rose Bowl is arguably one of the best stadiums to play in, one of the best college football atmospheres. Well, College Game Day in Tennessee had more people there than they had at their game last weekend or last Friday in against New Mexico. So it'll be interesting to see where both these programs go.
Also, I think another name to consider, just because Virginia Tech will have a lot of names to narrow down when it comes to the program's asking price and its intention or desire even to increase its football investments and its certain budget for the program in Blacksburg. It's not a program like obviously Clemson or Miami or Big Ten program like we just mentioned, a couple of them that go to the Rose Bowl routinely, but they're gonna have to consider who is it going to be that they're going to find or strike a balance between getting it right with, of course, the schematics, but also the recruiting approach, navigating NIL, the transfer portal, rev share, and then also staying within budget. I don't think or get the impression it's going to be Brian Hartline out of Ohio State. That was a name that was rumored earlier in the week once the news was announced. Then there's excuse me, there's also couple of other good names. There's Tony Elliott at Virginia, or I don't think he's going to be on the move anytime soon. James Madison's head man, Bob Chesney, has led the Dukes to some ridiculously good success. That team almost knocked off Louisville, as we talked about on Second Down Sunday a couple of weeks ago. And I think the choices are evident. There's Charles Huff, too. That is a name that's circulated as well, albeit he just got to Hattiesburg, Mississippi to lead Southern Miss across the Sun Belt Conference from his job at Marshall last year, where he took the program to some new heights. I think that could be a name to look at too if he is really ready for that second level, third level ACC job. But we've seen some newer names take balance in the ACC, take shape. There's Fran Brown at Syracuse, albeit he won a national title with Georgia. Do either of those names seem like a fit to you with Huff or even Chesney?
Yeah, they could potentially be good names to replace Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. It'll be interesting to see what decision they make, but for sure, sometimes you can't go wrong with that group of five coach that's had success for a couple of years and bring them to a Power Four school and see what they can do for sure.
Now, two SEC quarterbacks are also missing the mark. Texas freshman Arch Manning, he threw for just 114 yards against University of Texas El Paso, had 10 incompletions in a row in the first half, which led Manning to say he just simply has to play better, even though he's still adapting to Steve Sarkisian's offense. And Florida sophomore quarterback DJ Lagway threw 5 interceptions against number 3 LSU on Saturday. This was the second most in a game in Gators history. The head coach, Billy Napier, says he still wants Lagway starting, is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. But what do you think makes them so prone to their struggles right now, Owen?
As it relates to Lagway, I think it would just be that he hasn't been able to stay healthy at times. Even going back to his freshman year, he missed some time there in his freshman season, and Florida really struggled. And then again, touched on it on I believe it was either Second Down Sunday, last edition, or in a podcast episode last week. But he just hasn't been healthy. Like he missed time in camp and hasn't been able to stay on the field. And then as it relates to Arch Manning, I think you just got to give Arch time, as hard as it is, and as impatient as we want to be as fans, and we want to see him go out there and we want to crown him Heisman Trophy winner right away. He needs time. He's only seen spot playing time when it goes back to last year, and he didn't really throw the ball a whole lot. So I'm not too concerned with Arch in Texas. Like obviously they didn't play their best they could have against a team like UTEP, only putting up 27 points, and Arch struggled. But again, I think Texas will be fine. You got to give Arch Manning time. It's his first year. I don't think he leaves Texas after the season to go to the draft. I think he stays there both years to be able to start. And I think it just comes down to learning the Sarkisian offense with time. I think you'll be shocked to see how good this team and Arch Manning will be when it relates to later in the season when we're getting closer to conference conference championship weekend.
And how ridiculous it seems that these two quarterbacks were considered Heisman favorites going into the season. I remember we were talking about this on either episode 2 or episode 3 of Broadway to Broadway, how Arch Manning more specifically had lower, or rather had higher odds of winning the Heisman compared to DJ Lagway, given that Lagway had suffered through numerous injuries out of last season. Of course, he was 6-1 through 7 starts and seemed to have little struggles right away. But then he sustained injuries going into spring ball, into fall camp. His status for week 1 was even in question, and now he's seemingly mixing or exchanging rust for a lot of big patches of issues right now. Speaking of issues between programs, Brian Kelly, he went on his own tirade, scolded a Louisiana TV reporter in LSU's postgame press conference right after the Tigers win over the Gators on Saturday in the Bayou. WBRZ sports director Michael Coble asked a question regarding the Tigers' offensive performance. He was the first man in line for that question, Owen, and it was pretty much received with "Stop. Really? Is that the first question?" And then Kelly continued to outburst on Coble's further questions on the team's execution on third down. He was called spoiled by Kelly. And then, according to WBRZ, Coble then received apologetic text messages from Kelly on Monday. Additional apology made public during the start of LSU's press conference, the weekly press conference, that is. So this this had a dimension of its own, Owen, and Kelly, he was right to acknowledge his own inappropriate reaction, but that definitely seemed to put a little bit of a thorn into the Tigers' 3-0 start to the season.
Yeah, obviously he apologized, which is good for him. And Brian Kelly is known to be kind of a fiery personality. He went on the Paul Feinbaum show and kind of addressed that. So yeah, I think you look at this. Yeah, Kelly was probably in the wrong for coming off as a little heated towards that question. And I mean, the Tigers' offense has played a little slow the past 2 games, but all in all, I think this story kind of just wraps itself up with what you mentioned there is with the apology and everything. So it's good on Brian Kelly to acknowledge his mistakes.
Well, he acknowledges his mistakes, and LSU gets a crack at Southeastern Louisiana out of the FCS this weekend, which should be another chance for the Tigers to continue improving. But as Brian Kelly said, he sees it completely different from the way the media sees the execution of an offense and even how a defense gets off the field in 1 or 2 score games, as was the case this weekend. That was LSU's third win of the season, 20-10 against Florida. Billy Napier seemingly more on the hot seat than ever in his Florida tenure. So now Jordan Dickey, if you haven't heard a little bit about him as of late, the former 5-star wide receiver recruit for the Oregon Ducks and Dan Lanning. Well, now he's a former Oregon wide receiver. He's taking a new path in college football. He transfers to Diablo Valley Community College in California. It is a junior college program, and according to head coach Dan Lanning, he was suspended indefinitely in mid-August for violating team rules. Dickey had only 1 catch for 7 yards in each of the last 2 seasons. That surprised me a little bit because it seemed like when you redshirt, you at least get a little bit more playing time, given that you're eligible for at least 3 games. So he redshirted in 2023, and then it seemed like now this is a more of a career opportunity that's conventional for former blue chip recruits that either don't have the same value, they get hurt, or they just simply are out of line with team conduct, and that was the case here.
Yeah, best of luck to Jury and Dickey. I think of doing this too allows him to come back potentially and play for another program for 1 more year, going the uh, JUCO or community college route that way, where you play 2 years at a junior college. So I hope he can get back on track. Obviously, it's not, you don't like seeing a guy suspended for team rules or anything with that with a Dan Lanning led team, but I'm interested to see how this tests Oregon's wide receiver depth as we get later into the season here. Through the first 3 games, it hasn't really bothered them. They were able to put up a nice 34-14 win against Northwestern on the road this past weekend, and really they've become more of a running team. I think they used 7 different running backs last week, so that wide receiver depth will be tested, especially against a team like Penn State going on the road and in some of these other Big Ten matchups. So we'll have to see how the Oregon receiver depth fares as we move into the middle of the season.
Well, and funny enough, it doesn't seem to be phased by all that much, given how Evan Stewart's had the absence of a career with the knee injury that could redefine what his longevity looks like in Eugene, because especially with the lucrative nature of the transfer portal, even a partial meniscus tear that keeps you out for 6, 8 weeks of a season, if not sends you out for the rest of the season, that could ultimately be a telltale sign this is a recruit ready to move on, and or recruit a relatively young star in a college football program ready to move on. And the pressure on Malik Benson and freshman Decorian Moore hasn't seemingly got to them yet. Dante Moore is having a great season as he finds a new home for himself in Oregon. But Oregon, as you mentioned, has Penn State. We looked at it under the microscope. Defensively, of course, had to experience a little bit of turnarounds. But Oregon seems to be handling quite well so far in non-conference play. We go to Walking the Dog, second ever edition of this segment, which rates top player performances in the Power Four each week, and even the Group of Five. Owen, what are some of the biggest performances you had? Any two in mind?
Yeah, my two. First comes from that high-scoring affair in South Bend last weekend. Texas A&M quarterback Marcel Reed, who threw for 360 yards through the air with those two touchdowns in that upset win that snapped their program losing streak of 13 straight against top 25 teams on the road. Just a tremendous performance from Reed there on that final drive to be able to get the Aggies in the end zone and shock Notre Dame on the with their win on the road there. And then West Virginia running back Ty Edwards, who took over for Jaheim White, who is going to be out for the rest of the season, who is the starter for the Mountaineers through those first two games. He had 25 carries with 141 yards and three touchdowns on the ground in the win at home in the backyard brawl, which really got the Mountaineers fans excited, and Rich Rod coming back there. So West Virginia's got some momentum. They got a big game on the road as they open Big 12 play against Kansas. But Ty Edwards with a great performance, 5.6 yards per carry last Saturday, really provided the spark that the Mountaineers needed after losing their starting running backs. So it'll be interesting to see if he can have another big performance on the road against Kansas.
I have to go with Reed as well. Owen, this is a team that entered its matchup against Notre Dame fourth in the country in points responsibility average, at least with Reed under center. He dominated as expected. Threw for his first 300-yard game of the season, 2 touchdown passes, pardon me. And then the 86-yarder to Mario Craver in the first quarter. It was the 10th longest ever at Texas A&M. So the way that he's been a proven quarterback from this outing, it looks like can carry forward. Gave the Aggies their first road win over a ranked team since number 3 Auburn 11 years ago. I mean, that could be a defining win as it relates to developing momentum toward an FCS championship appearance if the Aggies can handle their tough schedule. The second one I go with, Mark Fletcher, the Miami Hurricanes running back, now in his junior season. He used the running lanes he had to perfection with 2 touchdowns in Miami's 5-score win against South Florida. Owen, he led the run game again in his third 100-yard run game of his career. He punished his safeties who anticipate the run. The cuts he has, as Mario Cristobal said again after the game on Saturday, can establish a lot of longevity within this running back room as it trickles down to Jordan Lyle, sophomore, who had a great freshman season last year. Punish his safeties. I mean, it's not even fair. It's at sometimes people talked about the explosiveness of the USF defense, but with the offensive line and the protection that Carson Beck had, it was just so seamless for him to rack up all the yards he did. And he's not even getting 20 carries a game, but averages a ton of yardage too. What do you think about that pairing?
I like it. I like it. Fletcher definitely had a big performance last Saturday and a big time win against USF. Many people thought USF could keep that game close, but Miami said no trap game here. We're focused. We're a different team. And I think that helps with the leadership of Carson Beck. Not to say Cam Ward wasn't a great leader last year. Of course he was. We're seeing what he's doing in the NFL with the Titans through 2 games, but this Miami team looks really good, and I think they continue the way they're going right now against Florida.
Now into the short list, we take a look at the big matchups to look after this weekend for the college football playoff contenders. Hurricanes have a quarterback playing Florida, looking to overcome a 2-interception first half against the Gators last year in Jacksonville as the Georgia starter. Beck just did not have his marquee outing of the regular season. Is this the Miami team that, albeit it already took down Florida convincingly in Gainesville last year, that drives Billy Napier out of the Florida Gators?
Well, there's a couple things I'm looking at as you pose that question. I think the Miami passing attack will have its way with Florida. They're averaging 300 yards per game, and albeit the Florida defense has played well these past two games in the USF game and this past weekend against LSU, they've only allowed 38 points, which ranks 26 in the country. They're allowing 13 points per game. I think the run game could really be a deciding factor for Miami if Mark Fletcher is able to do what he did last weekend. It could be uh, another big time performance from him. But I'm gonna have to go with Miami, and I'm gonna have them winning 34-20. I think Carson Beck in this Miami pass game with the athletes they have on the outside, they cruise to another victory. I think Florida, they're going to try to play better, but I can't go with Florida simply from the fact that Lagway just had a 5 interception game. Now he might play better, but we talked about it. They're putting a lot of pressure on their defense, and that offense needs to start taking care of the ball better and scoring points in the red zone. So I got Miami 34-20 in this one. What say you, Wyatt?
I would probably argue that the similar outcome because of how dominant Miami's run game is, and this team is a far cry from where it was 3 seasons ago, even 2 seasons ago, when establishing consistent time of possession. Thinking back to a couple of years ago in bowl games, especially big games that Miami had to show up in and prove itself on the national stage, time of possession was just not as much of a strength, and it takes time to develop that in an offensive line that can establish the line of scrimmage, that can dominate runs on first and second down, team showing zone. They pack the box. They put an outside linebacker or nickel in it. And Miami does a good job now of having depth in that running back and making sure that it's used quite frequently to establish a lot of its offense. I think I'd probably take Miami 38-17 in this one. I just don't see Lagway throwing less than 2 interceptions. Ruben Bain off the edge is one of the better edge rushers, not only ACC, but in the country too. We go into another couple of games here to look at. Utah has experience at quarterback in junior Devin Dampier, and he hasn't looked phased in his first season over from New Mexico with his former offensive coordinator, Jason Beck at New Mexico. Dampier, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions, and then running back Wayshawn Parker. He averages 7 yards per carry, Owen. Texas Tech, meanwhile, leads the country in scoring offense with a second-ranked pass game at almost 384 yards. Seems like this one could be a barn burner from almost the get-go.
Yeah, it looks like it could be a high scoring game. I will say Texas Tech rush defense is pretty good. Obviously, you look at the weak competition there, but only giving up about 42 yards on the ground per game will be interesting. I look at this. You mentioned Dampier. I think his dual threat ability will be the difference because when you look at Baron Morton, he's really been a pocket passer. He hasn't really needed to make plays with his legs. It'll be interesting to see if he can. We haven't seen that from him yet. He's just been able to kind of sit back in the pocket and make plays with from that aspect. And Texas Tech's pass game has looked really good, albeit against lower competition. But Utah with those 290 rush yards per game is going to be a big factor. I think the third down conversion, whoever is able to pick up those and stay on the field more, could be a big factor as well. But I'm going to have to go with Devin Dampier and Utah winning 30-24 in this one. I just think again, his using his legs will be the difference in this one for the Utah Utes.
Let's go into a Big Ten matchup. We mentioned that those are getting underway this weekend. Get Nebraska and Michigan. Nat Rule has junior quarterback Dylan Raiola, who's proven himself on a lot of Big Ten stages, but now can he do it against a Michigan team that is without its head coach in Sharon Moore for the second of 2 games in a suspension in Michigan's sign-stealing era? Bryce Underwood in Michigan's drubbing over Central Michigan had his first 100-yard rushing game of his career. He's proven that he can be a dual threat so far. I mean, it was less so in Oklahoma, obviously, back in week 2 as Underwood led the Wolverines to that bounce back game last week against Central Michigan. But against Oklahoma, the run offense didn't really establish itself. And outside of that 75-yard rushing touchdown from Jamal Haynes, that's something that just wasn't there. And I'd figure that's going to be one of their first priorities going into this week.
100%. I think the run game is going to be critical. I mean, Nebraska's at home. It's a 2:30 kickoff. Their fans are going to be fired up in Nebraska there. So I think if Michigan's able to run the ball, my biggest question too will be, will Michigan let Bryce Young, or not Bryce Young, Bryce Underwood, excuse me, air it out? They kind of let had the keys on him in that game against Oklahoma on the road. They didn't let him throw it as much as maybe we thought they would. So that's going to be my biggest question is if Underwood will be able to kind of drop back and throw this ball 20 to 25 times in this one because we know what Michigan can get from the run game. We're going to have two really solid defenses in this game. The run game is going to play a big factor. I got Michigan in a close one, 23-21.
23-21. Nebraska, well, it's seemed like it's been under the longest pressure to find a new level of success nationally for the longest time. But now this team could very well be taking that next step. This week one would be a pretty big one in order to get back into the Big Ten picture. Clemson, meanwhile, was just outplayed on the road against unranked Georgia Tech, walked off on that fire drill field goal with almost no time left in the fourth quarter. Doesn't have an FCS or group of five opponent to play here in week four. Instead, it faces a Syracuse team that has lost six in a row in the all-time series. But not all the six have been wire to wire. As you know, Owen, 2021, 2022, there were one-score games both at the Dome in Central New York and then down at Death Valley. It has proven it can win in different ways this season. The Syracuse Orange took down Connecticut in overtime, and not a game that anybody really expected Fran Brown, from the success he led Syracuse to last season, to have to be resolved in overtime. And then it just completely wiped it away the next week. One wire to wire. I'd figure this one could be a little bit closer.
Yeah, I think it'll be. These games are usually always closer than what Vegas predicts. I definitely think this game is probably within a touchdown. The biggest thing for me is Cade Klubnik play clean football? If he's able to do that, I think Clemson bounces back in a nice way. I also need to see what Steven Angeli can do versus that Tiger secondary for Syracuse. If he's able to have time and be able to throw the ball, it should be an interesting game. But I think Clemson wins this one.
Clemson could very well win it. One score or even three scores. I don't think a ton of people would be surprised with the vengeance that people want to see out of Dabo Swinney. Jackson Arnold has led Auburn's offense to a T so far this year. 3 wins in a row to start the year. The Tigers averaged the third most rushing yards in the SEC. Arnold scored 2 touchdowns on the ground. Can the balanced attack for the Oklahoma transfer quarterback and less conservative clock management by Hugh Freeze be the difference this week?
Auburn's going to have to be able to run the football. If they can't run the football in this game, then they're going to be in some trouble on the road in a hostile environment. Again, John Mateer's been amazing for Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma gets by in this one, and I think Auburn plays well, but they don't have enough firepower on offense through the passing game to win.
Ain't no love in Oklahoma, and there might just not be enough of it in the front seven for the Sooners to take down Hugh Freeze's Tigers this weekend. How about we go into Tulane and Ole Miss? The Rebels are already 2-0 in the SEC despite Austin Simmons' foot injury. He actually appeared in the second quarter, a 4-yard completion, but then he was in a boot for the rest of the game, left for the locker room, and was out for the second half. He suffered that injury in week 2 against Kentucky. How Trinidad Chambliss performed as a dual threat for 2 passing touchdowns. It seemed like that'll be well matched against Tulane's momentum from the Jake Retzlaff keeper with the 8-point lead, as Tulane definitely managed the clock pretty well late in that game.
Yeah, I would even say Trinidad Chambliss could play if Austin Simmons is not 100% in this one. I think we could see again a high scoring game, but I think Ole Miss probably wins by 2 touchdowns.
Ole Miss can win by 2 touchdowns. How about we take another look at the Big Ten once again? Illinois takes on ranked Indiana, and these are 2 ranked teams in Illinois and Indiana facing off, as Illinois is already multiple great defensive performances into the season now against Duke and Western Michigan. It's second in the nation in turnover margin, having not turned it over yet. It looks for its first road win, Owen, against a top 10 team, pardon me, since 1990 against Wisconsin. I think that the 7-game winning streak can extend if Brett Bielema's defensive unit is just capable of getting off the field consistently.
100%. I think if they're able to get a couple turnovers against Mendoza, the starting quarterback for Indiana, then I think Illinois will be in great shape to pull off a victory. And it's weird because they're actually underdogs going on the road. You would think Illinois is a better team than Indiana, but a lot of respect for Indiana from Vegas. So it'll be interesting to see if Illinois can provide a little sparks there. But I definitely think the Fighting Illini get the victory against Indiana.
And this would be a spark for an Illinois team that is trying to get into the college football playoff. Very well could be a finalist for an at-large spot if it wins this week and only loses to number one Ohio State in the second week of October. How about we turn the tables here and get into some NFL talk? We welcome you back into the NFL Blitz. Josh Allen treated fans with some great games last week. This week, he let James Cook take over for 2 rushing touchdowns on the grounds, and the Bills won again. Big game for Buffalo this week. We also have a look at a couple other games. The Giants and the Cowboys had a barn burner of their own from AT&T Stadium. What did you think of the Bills' performance and then also the Giants' loss to the Cowboys? It seemed like a big step for Brian Dable.
Yeah, Russell Wilson played really well for the Giants. Obviously had that late interception in overtime, but the Giants no doesn't seem to be any pressure to rush Jackson Dart in there for sure. It was a really high scoring game and just Cowboys came away with the win at home. And then referring to Josh Allen, it was kind of nice to see that. I mean, he got dinged up, got hit in the nose early in this one, and then James Cook provided the spark that he needed to, and the Bills took care of business.
Couple of other good games to look at. The Lions back on track against the Chicago Bears. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you saw Owen, but the defense for Detroit, I believe it was on a pickoff or a fumble recovery, regardless of which, following a turnover, it hit the Ben Johnson Lions play call from last season in the end zone. Did you see that celebration at all?
I did not, but the Lions definitely showed that week one was a little bit of a fluke, which I kind of expected. I think the Packers with Micah Parsons proved to be that good with their win against Washington on Thursday night to open week two. But 52 points from the Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 3 touchdowns. Jared Goff went back to looking like an MVP candidate through in week two with those passing touchdowns. And Ben Johnson, all he had to say after a Bears reporter asked him, would you want them to kick the field goal there on fourth down? It's like they don't kick field goals. They go for it. Like, what do you want? What do you want us to do? Like, we got to stop them, Like that's what they do. They score touchdowns. So, you know, Bears fans and reporters not quite understanding that Motor City Dan Campbell means takes no doesn't step down. He means business and 52 points from the Lions. So the Bears need to get back to work.
And speaking of stopping people, man, Green Bay looks very good from early on, stopping the Commanders. Looks like Terry McLaurin, ever since he got that contract, I sent you a meme earlier in the week about Terry McLaurin and what he had lacked in his performance against the Packers since the season started. And of course, all of the contract tension between him and Washington resolved finally. And it seemed like he would just go back to being scary Terry. Well, all of a sudden he's scared Terry on the field seemingly, but a lot of season left to be played. I think the one other memorable point I have from that game or moment was Tucker Kraft. He made 2 men miss as he eluded tackles for about an extra 10 or 15 yards on one catch. And I kind of just sat back and laughed and thought, man, this is supposed to be an NFC East division contender. And it seems like it has a lot of work to do. Well, JJ McCarthy, he also seemed to have come back down to earth as well. What did you think of his performance while we still have a few minutes?
Yeah, it was obviously rough, but anytime you're down, going in a couple of backup offensive linemen starting in your place, and then you lose another going into the game, it's tough. And the Falcons definitely look like they have an improved pass rush, not to mention that, but Joe Burrow's injury as well. A lot of quarterback injuries going into week three with Jaden Daniels potentially missing their game against the Raiders. McCarthy now has an ankle injury. He's out 2 to 4 weeks. Obviously, Joe Burrow being out for 3 months, and we saw the moves the Bengals made yesterday, bringing in a couple quarterbacks. So it'll be interesting to watch how these teams perform without some of their signal callers. But yeah, JJ McCarthy definitely had a really tough time out there, and I think the Vikings offensive line was a product of that, as well as the Falcons pass rush.
And lastly, we'll roll into Broadway books where Owen unveils his glorious record on his weekly picks for the first 3 weeks. He updates us on his futures picks from the preseason. How can listeners bet on college football wisely, Owen, regardless of how they view books and the tension or even pleasure they have with Vegas?
Yeah, well, we've gotten off to a little bit of a slow start. I'll have to tally the win-loss record for second down Sunday or even for Broadway books next week, but not a whole lot on here. We have the under 45.5 in the Iowa Rutgers game. That's at minus 110. I like that. UNLV minus 120 money line against a MAC opponent. Army at plus 130 at home off a bye week. I really like that. I think they'll be able to run the ball on North Texas. NC State plus 3 at an even money plus 100, and then Michigan money line are the plays right now as we are nearing an end here. But potentially could have a couple more games when it comes to Saturday, and then obviously some NFL action. But as of right now, that's all I have listed. But hoping to get off to a good start here in week 4 and bounce back a little bit.
Speaking of Owen's pick for an Army win this week, coming off a historic Kansas State win last week, or before the bye week, at least for Army, big chance for you to tune into Frontline Football. The second edition of it comes your way just after the time of this recording. We'll have to continue to update you on everything going on with Navy and Army as they have a big chance for 10-win seasons again going into the Army Navy game. Well, we appreciate you joining us here on the 8th ever edition of Broadway to Broadway. He's Owen Kasanovich. I'm Wyatt Copeland. We're signing off once again, but don't miss us on Frontline Football. And of course, Second Down Sunday coming up once again for week 4. Thanks again for everybody for tuning in. So long and enjoy all the action this week.